Hello there. Welcome to our podcast, Africa to the World, where we tell African stories to transform people's lives. I am Yvonne.
And I'm Shami.
And we are your hosts. So today we are on part 2 of talking about postpartum depression, or what we can term now peripartum depression, PPD. And Shamis is going to introduce our guests tonight. We've got Coach Bobby, a patron of our podcast, who's been with us from the genesis and up to now. Over to you, Shamisa.
Thanks, Yvonne. And a special welcome to our guest, Coach Bobby. It's her second time on our platform, and we're very happy to have her back. So we've called her in to chat to us because she is a mental health champion. She is passionate about all things mental health, and we thought, what better person to come and join this conversation. She's done a lot of work on mental health within the African context, so we're very keen to hear what she has to say about that. Welcome, Coach Bobby. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be back home. For me to be back, I believe there's something positive and of value that I'm doing. I do not take this invitation for granted. I'm so excited. I'm so passionate about mental health, so I really show up.
Awesome. I'd like to start it off a little bit broad. So as I just said, you've done quite a bit of work within the mental health space, within an African context specifically. Could you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing in that space?
Okay, so I've been doing a lot of training, speaking engagements. So I recently was recognized by the United Nations. So I received the United Nations Women Global Influence Award for the work. So it's such an honor to see that the work that I'm doing, the world, and we're talking about the UN, it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's good to hear that people appreciate. So I was recently from the US, I was in Australia. So for me, that is really huge. Someone spotted me on Facebook because they've seen the work and they got value. Next week, I'll be in Ghana speaking to entrepreneurs. So everything mental health, we can marry it to our everyday aspect of life. So it's something I am passionate about because it's not prioritized in our content, but slowly it's really, really getting its necessary attention. So I'd like to use the word attention. So I've been up, school, coaching, training. I haven't done much of the counseling because of the speaking engagements, but I've got a team of counselors that I've recruited just to help us be able to encourage people to seek professional help to get therapy. So I'm also a licensed psychosocial counselor. Recently, I also got a license in child counseling because I saw there was a huge gap last year. So I signed up this year at the beginning of the year so that we can help our children, because mental health has got no first, no age. It affects everyone.
That's absolutely brilliant, all the work that you've been doing in that space.
Yes, congratulations, Coach Bobby, on your nomination and the great work you're doing across Africa.
I would like to know, could you pack me in your bag?
No problem.
Make that too.
We'll have two.
Okay, no, on a serious note though. I'd like to know what the most fascinating or unusual thing you've found when it comes to mental health within an African context.
So for me, the most fascinating thing that I've found about mental health in Africa is people do not give it the necessary attention. People still think it's not important. People think it's for the Western world, and mostly it's associated with spirituality, laziness. It's associated with rituals, madness. So even with so much information, people still believe, even people that are learned don't really give it the necessary attention that it deserves. So there's so much of the stigma, there's so much of the discrimination. So for me, that's really fascinating.
And have you, within the different spaces that you've been working in, had a chance to actually address this particular issue? Especially even with the learned people, because sometimes I think we can be super stubborn.
I have, because this is really the agenda that I'm running with, and mostly identify the different audiences, starting from the grassroots, the different professionals, because you'll be really amazed that even in the health industry itself, the people who still face discrimination. So it's not just people that are not in the medical field, people who are in the medical field but are not working in the mental health area, like the psychiatrists, the psychologists, they too face the stigma. So I was doing a presentation in Australia and New Zealand addressing mental health stigma and discriminations. We normally have the self-stigma, we have the social stigma, we have the institutional stigma, which is in the work environment, and also the professional within the health industry itself, where people who treat or attend to psychiatrists or psychologists receive the stigma and discrimination from their fellow practitioners. So I use every platform that I'm given to address this issue, and just to say we are all on a spectrum and we are all at risk. Anyone stands a chance they can have it. So it's not just to say it's for certain people. We are all at risk. Mental health and mental illness are two different things. So you find that when people hear of mental health, they quickly rush and equate it to madness, a lunatic. They start to label people in that way. But before I speak in any environment, I don't take it for granted that people know. I begin to address it too, because the mental health is just a journey. We all have it. We're on a spectrum. Then the illness talks about the different disorders, the depression, the bipolar, schizophrenia, and dementia. These are now the disorders or the illnesses. So people should learn to differentiate. So I utilize every space to talk about that.
So, Coach Bobby, you being a mental health champion, what is your thinking around postpartum depression or maybe peripartum depression?
So I'll not take it for granted that everyone understands what it is. So quickly give a simple definition of what PPD is. So this is a depression suffered by a mother who was just given birth due to, like you said, hormonal imbalances, psychological changes due to childbearing. This is a real situation out there happening, and mostly it's not taken seriously. When a woman in Africa, because we're talking about it from the African context, is being prepared for marriage, the woman is loaded with so much information about marriage, and mostly they're not prepared about bearing children and the stages. So you find that when one goes in, the first time mom, they don't know what to expect, and when they reach out to say this is what they're going through, mostly they're told you're not the first one. Our grandmothers, our parents went through this. So they don't get the necessary changes, because you see, when a woman gives birth, the body doesn't remain the same. There's so many changes happening, so much is happening, and mostly some women tend to neglect their children, the bonding aspects. There's some that are afraid, that just didn't want even the baby. So those are real things happen. It's not that they want attention, because mostly from the people I spoke to, people said you're just seeking attention, which is not good. And sometimes they're labeled in a certain way, like they didn't care. But these psychological changes happening, the hormonal imbalances, and someone is crying out for help and they are not getting the necessary help.
Okay, so can we talk a little bit about the psychology behind it, according to your understanding? Because you did highlight the issues of hormonal imbalance, right? What else from your studies, from your research, have you picked up?
So you find that this is a period about 6 weeks, and during after a woman has given birth, and the reproductive system gradually changes to a pre state, and mostly from the research I've done is to do with the psychological aspects, because when you talk about psychological, it has to do with the way a person thinks, behaves, and acts. So it begins to affect the way they act towards their partner, towards the child. And mostly there's so much pressure that is on the mother, and they tend to lose hope or sight of who they are. They others stop birthing, others just don't even want to attend to the baby. So all these changes contribute to the behavior of a mother. So I would say it's not only to a first-time mother, it also does happen to a mother that has been a mother and has given birth to a second or third or fourth child.
You highlighted that, in our African setting, mental health is associated with, like rituals or voodoo or whatever we want to term it happening to an individual. Women in our own society can't even voice up when it comes to, PPD. They can't talk about it because they're so scared to be told you should be tough. What's your experience, your research, understanding in that area of the way we Africans treat women who go through this, and we act like they're whining about it when it's something that actually exists?
The sad thing is this stigma or discrimination comes from the fellow women, the fellow mothers, and it's saddening because they've been through this. For me, it also takes me back to say they don't appreciate what mental health is. So mental health is broad because all these postpartum depression and other anxiety come in is not giving the necessary attention. And in the African context, so much is expected from a woman, so much is overloaded. Even when you prepare a woman or getting married, so much you need to do this for the husband, you need to do this. So a woman is loaded with so much, such that even when they're in that marriage or they're pregnant, they are so they're not doing things out of uh, willingness to do, but because it's expected as a duty, a cultural duty, or else she'll look like she's a foolish woman, she's not a strong woman. And mostly they tend to refer to how did our grandparents manage this, even when there are so many children, which is a sad thing, which is very sad, even with us seeing a 21st century woman who is educated, these things are still going on because the cultural systems are still there. So I believe it's high time we change the narrative by having such conversation to be able to say what you feel is validated. You need to begin by encouraging. So what you're feeling is validated, because when you're in a hopeless state, because when someone is depressed, they're in a hopeless state. So they need to be assured that what they're feeling, you need to validate what they're feeling for you to be able to help them.
That's so true, Bobby. The importance of validating, someone's feelings when they actually come out and say, I'm facing this and this problem. And just add on to what Yvonne was saying about religion and how that comes into play and the way that society responds. Actually, the girl who asked me to have a series where we talk about postpartum depression. And I was talking to her, I think it was last week, asking her, so has your husband agreed for you to go and see the doctor because he was making a fuss about it. He didn't think it was necessary, thought, she's just making this stuff up. And what really hit me was when she said, today he woke me up. I forget if it was 4 or 5 in the morning, and said, wake up, bath, you are going to the mountain with everyone else who's going for prayer up the prayer mountain, because your problem is not psychological. It has nothing to do with anything biological. Your problem is spiritual. So you need to go and pray. And it wasn't even we need to go and pray. It was you need to go and pray. So I'm just like, how can we even start to break through this type of thinking if it's something that's happening within your own home where your partner just doesn't get it? And it's not even that he's only refusing to give what's this, medical support, or go and get medical help. It's also just in general. He's like, I'm not getting a helper. What do you need a helper for? It's just me, you, plus one child in our little house. I don't understand what you want this helper for. It makes no sense. How do we even begin to break through that type of thinking?
I believe we've already started by having such conversations. So we need to be intentional. When we meet up in family meetings, what kind of conversations are we having when we have those WhatsApp groups? I believe now with the oncoming with tech, people now have made WhatsApp groups and all that. So apart from other issues where we just meet to talk about a funeral or an illness to gather and contribute money, what other conversations are we having? I call them difficult conversations. There's an elephant in the room, but no one wants to address it. So I believe it to take one who can board it out there and just say, what do you think? Of course, you're not going to attack to say, you can begin by asking, what do you think about mental health? From the responses you get, to be able to know where to direct the conversation. When you're meeting with a set of friends, or you've got male friends, you ask them whether it's your boyfriend or what do you think? You start by asking questions. From the responses to be able to guide on how to break those grounds in churches. So, because when we are in church, it's not about just the spiritual side. I always say, human beings, we need to look at the 6 rules of life. So spirituality, because if you're not in a resourceful state, believe you won't be able to pray. You won't be able to do the normal things that you're supposed to do. Even prayers will irritate you, because there's a certain perception that you're going to view God because of the way you were raised, of the way you were introduced to. Your partner doesn't care. You begin to view God as a father who doesn't care. So it's very important that we start having, I know, because where we are coming from, we never used to have such conversations. Let's forgive each other. I always say people didn't know better. So we need to be kind and we need to be cautious the way we bring out. When I was at the UN sessions, in one of the sessions where we had a panel discussion, where we were talking about a 21st century woman and women working hard and doing the most. There was a sect group in Kenya, and this came from 2 men who originally come from Kenya. Women are doing so much work in the community, and they're sensitized. Men are also taught to say women, the place is no longer in the kitchen, they need to contribute and all this. So the women, because mostly there's a certain group of people in Kenya where the men sit, the women go and do the work. When they make the money, the men grab the money. So now there's a team that came from the US and other groups like these UN groups, which was educating women on mindset change and other programs so that they just don't live in that odd mindset. The men stood and formed a gang to say, oh, quite all right, let them go and learn. They will see when they come back. It is so sad that even in the 21st century, with so much information, this is really, really happening. But we should not give up. We should keep on pushing the agenda. Let's involve the men. Because if we're just going to say it's the women who are going, then we're not driving anywhere. Because there's so much of sensitization, there's so much of mentorship going on with the girl child, and the boy child is being left out. So we can start the conversation with the young ones. For me, it starts from individual level, it starts from the family level, the community. What kind of conversations are we bringing to the table aside from money conversations? We need to begin to look at mental health just the way we appreciate the physical health, because these two are connected. WHO says there is no health without mental health. You need to take care of your mind because you have your mind for the rest of your life. But then if you do not invest in it, even those goals that you have set for you to become, the family goals, your career goals, when you're not in a resourceful state, when you're depressed, you won't be able to achieve the things. You feel you'll be in a state of hopelessness. You will think nobody cares. Why am I saying so? I've dealt the number of depressed cases. Even the one that my sister's friend I was talking about, she just dropped dead because she had so much going on. There's so much that is expected of her. Yes, she does the work at home. She's a career woman. She goes out of her way because maybe a husband does a certain amount, but then there's just so much that is expected from a woman. It began to pressurize her. When she opened up to people, this is how I'm feeling. She even told someone, please connect me to Coach Barbie. People made fun of her. Now, they were confessing now yesterday. So no, she even mentioned to say, one day the way I'm feeling, like my head doesn't stop paining, I'll just drop dead and die. And then that's exactly what happened. So sad that a life was lost. But how many more lives are we waiting before us start to talk about? So I believe this is the right platform we've started, but then let's not work until um, we reach a break point or lose someone for us to start talking about, or we wait until it hits into our family, because this really affects everybody, whether you're white, whether you're black. So things are changing. As they are changing, let us also be intentional. For us that have got the knowledge, let's be the ones to be able to light that candle to start introducing this conversation.
I agree with you that on that one. I just want to take you a little bit back. Shamiso, you mentioned that um, this man would wake up his wife and ask her to go to a prayer mountain. And in my research, it says that a lot of women use different traditional beliefs, methods to deal with PPD, and they also talk about family violence being one of the the factors that leads to one, slipping down that slippery slope and never coming back. And family violence can be termed into different things. Not that I want to say this husband was being violent, but I want to believe he didn't understand the emotional state that he found his wife in. And it is said that different women across different parts of the world have cultural beliefs of how do they treat BPD, right? In China, for instance, they eat warm food, abstain from sex, and just naturally take care. And they speak about how it's done in Nigeria, that they tie something warm around their stomach, sometimes induce alcohol for lactation to produce milk. What is your opinion when it comes to people's traditional beliefs and methods that they might want to maybe use to cope with PPD and to make sense of this? Because I want to believe that this man thought he was in his right to wake his wife up and ask her to go to the prayer mountain and maybe pray this thing away. But what he really didn't understand was that it takes a lot more. Maybe getting her to be more active can help get her back into the swing of things, but finding things that help her. What's your opinion when it comes to traditional beliefs?
Like I said in my earlier um, preamble, to say when you asked me what was fascinating about mental health, I mentioned to say there's a cultural aspect and the spiritual side of it, that people will demonize certain types of behaviors. So there is a risk to that, and we have seen people have died. So maybe they worked then during our great grandmothers, but now that we've been schooled, because whatever you believe in work for you, but then we found that in the wrong run, lives were lost. And now that we have the knowledge, let's do better. A lot of, yes, they use these harmful. So you need to look at the coping mechanisms. So there's some that are healthy, there's some that are not healthy, because with the unhealthy ones, yes, they'll work, but to be temporal. You haven't addressed the real issue. So this is where now professional help comes in. You need to seek, you cannot treat a psychological problem with muti or these rituals and all that. So they may have worked, but to a certain stage. So, and people adopted them maybe from generation to generation. But then this is where we encourage people to seek professional help. The goodness of seeking professional help, because the assessments that are done, and they'll be able, these assessments, when they're done, you find that the problem differs from mother to mother. So you can't use this as a one size fits all. Because mostly with the risk of using traditional medicine, mostly they would say one size fits all. But then when you go to seek professional help, they're going to assess that, because depression is not something to play with. And it comes in three stages, because there's the mild, there's a moderate, and the severe one. So once you ignore, maybe the reason why we do assessment, they'll be able to tell at what stage one is, and they'll be able to give the necessary diagnosis. So the danger with one using the rituals is they don't know the severity of the problem that the woman has.
That's totally correct. So research says in the sub-Saharan Africa, only about 5% of women seek for postpartum care or postpartum depression, and reasons mainly are due to financial constraints and also the distance that they have to travel. So you, as a mental health champion, what methods or what maybe methods can you use to bridge that gap, to bring information, or to bring maybe like create groups, even though people may be far apart, but what can you do as a mental health champion, bridge the gap of actually getting access to this information at least, or access to someone?
So what I would say I would do first, I want to speak into that when we come to the African context, there's really understaffed healthcare when it comes to mental health. So what I would suggest that we would do is they train more people, like community leaders in the community, that will be able to help, because you find that when you look at the statistics, like one in South Africa where it says 2.5 against 100 psychologists attend to about 1,000 people. In Malawi, there was maybe one psychiatrist to 100. And mental health is not something like you can rush to. You need to really have the right attention. You need to give the patient the right attention. But you find that even the few that are there, the statistics, like, it was very disturbing when I was doing a presentation on why people should seek a professional in mental health. That includes the psychiatrists, the social workers, the psychologists. The stats in my country alone were very disturbing, in that those who are in the public system, the whole country, imagine, we have 13 psychiatrists. Of the 13, 4 are women. So, and for them that are trained, most of them do not even want to work for the public service. They would rather work for the NGOs, they would rather work for the United Nations, which is not different from other countries, because when I was doing my research, I went on the ground to people that are really working there, South Africa, they were saying it's a sad story. Even in South Africa, we thought, okay, it's developed than other African countries, but it still had the same challenge. Zimbabwe, still Malawi. I do a lot of work in Malawi. We get people understaffed, and it's not easy to deal with people with mental health. It's a strain on its own. For me, what I was saying, we need governments to come on board, invest heavily in mental health, just like they invest in other sectors. And we should not just focus on the urban setup. The real problems that are there in the communities is let's train community leaders, people that are passionate like advocates. We train them that they'll be able to attend to those people. Unless for the severe situations, then they can do referrals. So that's what I would say about that.
So I just love, Bobby, you mentioned that we're all on a spectrum. And I think we'd be a lot more sympathetic if we thought about mental health in that way. To say, I'm not necessarily always going to be at 100%. I probably am not even at 100% now. Sometimes we don't know that we're not okay. And I think if more people actually started to think, okay, this thing sits on a spectrum where it can go either way. My mental health can deteriorate or it can get better. It's going to make us, want to be a little bit more understanding of the things that people are going through. And I think a lot of the times, I'll say as Christians within an African context, we tend to really spiritualize the issue of mental wellness. And we like to throw out this, just pray about it.
Go to the mountain.
Yeah, go to the mountain, turn to God, all will be well. Or someone's throwing scripture at you. And for me, when someone comes to me and I'm in that state and they're saying, oh, just go and pray about it, I'm like, I wish I could have put my facial. I wish I could have put my facial in the podcast, but I essentially am giving them a side eye because I'm like, that is not what I know. You're trying to be helpful, but that's not what I need right now when I'm in that space. And you also touched on how sometimes people within that space can then start to think, oh, I've got a father who doesn't care. And I think that's an important aspect of the spiritual that we don't talk about, to say, how can mental health issues negatively affect your spirituality and your relationship with God? Because that does happen. Some people will run to God, they will find solace in that, and maybe you can say they will come out stronger or having a stronger relationship with God because that's what they're leaning on. And for some people, it's the opposite. It's like, okay, God, where are you? I actually just don't even want to talk to you because you're not coming through. And I think these are conversations that we definitely need to be more open to have, especially within the family space, because as we've already said, on a national scale, and it's all across the world, we don't necessarily have enough professionals to cater to everyone. So within our families, within our friendship circles, we need to, become more educated and try and experiment with different ways of supporting each other, especially if you're dealing with someone who you already know is struggling in whatever way it is.
You're absolutely right about that, Shami. So, I think I'd like to throw this back to you, Bobby, as a woman of faith, from your own experience. What is the church doing right now to address such issues, right? I think we're way past the mark of sugarcoating stuff. We're way past the mark of ignoring it. We're way past the mark of praying it away. But what is the church doing for the women? And what are you, as a mental health champion in your denomination, what are you doing differently to bridge the gap? I know you cannot service everyone in the world or save everyone, but I would like to know what kind of activities are you doing to, just bring this awareness and make it a normal topic that, it should not be spoken in corridor. it should not be church corridor talk, but it should be something we publicly say, listen, we've got a crisis here and we need to address this as soon as yesterday.
So as a woman of faith, and there's opportunity to be in Bible school for 3 years. So for me, I've found a way to bridge the gap between faith and mental health. I know most people say, no, it contradicts. There's a certain word that God uses me and gives me revelation. And when I'm talking, I'm passionate about the church because I believe I'm the church. I'm part of the body of Christ. So I understand the role the church plays. The clergy are very influential. So for me, what I've done is come up with programs where we speak to churches for free. We speak, educate them, beginning with the leaders there. Because most times people mistake someone because he's a pastor, then they're automatically counselor. No, spiritual counseling is different from the psychological side of it. So the first thing we need to address that pastor is not a therapist. Pastor is not, they can be a spiritual counselor, but they're not a qualified, licensed to attend to certain psychological issues. The church has done more harm in them thinking they're helping, because I don't know if it's Shami who said where this over spiritualized issues, they demonize with most cases that I've dealt with. And I had two people who yesterday at the panel discussion. One is still battling with mental health. She's an activist, a strong activist, where she was told to go and pray to the mountain in a place where you're hearing voices, and they said they poured a whole bottle of anointing oil on her, thinking it's demons. When she was hearing voices and all that, those were real, she was feeling them. But that's not. She says she had, because of the medicine she was taking, because she also had psychosis. So because the side effects of the medicine were making her tremble, when she went to be prayed for, they were saying this demon is stubborn. We are praying for her to fall. She's not falling. But then there was a moment now the medicine began to say, now it's responding. So they were even happy and all that. They were not schooled. For me, let's forgive them. Let's be deliberate. Take the conversations to the church. So for me, not just to the church, because I started to target the church mother bodies, because this is where these churches submit to, so that we can have it as a policy. When it's black and white, it's regulated, it's law, it's then easy for us to move. So going to the church mother bodies, I identified the different church mother bodies that churches belong and submit to. Begin to educate them, use the language they understand. Go to the Bible, show them that mental health is not new under the sun. Even Jesus Christ understands this. The scripture in Matthew says, are you heavy laden? You go to God and to seek the help. So even in there, God cares about people's well-being. So you speak the language that they understand, because if you go to this, believe you me, they won't be able to guess, because some people have not used the right approach. They're going like they're attacking the church. So for us to be able to win, we need to speak the language they understand. When I went there, oh my God, he could not believe, because the moment people hear mental health, they look at you as enemies. Believe you me, they just don't want to even near. But then you say, okay, speak the language that they understand and point it in scripture. I believe I'm great. So yesterday they were saying, oh, at the American Embassy, we were gossiping about you, Coach Babi, because there's a way you found balance. That really, for me, has helped me. I believe that's the reason God allowed me to go to Bible school and this, so that we're able to bridge that gap in the church. The church is still influential. These people in our families, in our community, do go to churches, and pastors, believe you me, have got so much influence. So imagine if the pastor says these are demons, the effect it has on the congregation. So we start with the head there, the leaders there. Once we educate them, then they'll be able to support programs now in the churches, in the different groups, the men's group and all that. In my church, at first, they used to say, oh, this little girl was in Sunday school. She's talking about this. I didn't get tired. I was speaking, they're recognizing me. Now I speak, they understand the support. I bring in people who are expert to maybe the Drug Enforcement Commission to talk about drugs, different groups. We talk to them. And because, mental health challenges differ from men to youths and they begin to appreciate. So it's for us to be deliberate, to have people that people who've got the knowledge, but they're scared to just go out there. Let's use these platforms. Anywhere in the world, the church has got influence. It's for us to be able to end this. You tell them to say there are things that are spiritual. And for me, I like to use this example to say, when you've got malaria or you've got a heart problem, apart from you praying, because prayer is a weapon. Then when you go to seek help or therapy, it's a strategy that you get. So prayer is a weapon that you use. Yes, you pray. When you've got a heart problem, you need a transplant. You don't just end up in praying. You go and see a cardiologist. You even see specialists. Even in the mental health, there are people who deal with certain issues. That's why we have got psychologists, we've got psychiatrists, the psychosocial. So I would say, let's speak to the leaders first. Right. We shouldn't just go there. Yes.
Okay, I agree with you. You mentioned something that stood out for me. You talked about psychosis, and I think because of the train of thought we are on with the podcast, I've come across a lot of cases, both in Africa and in America, where a lot of women kill their children due to postpartum psychosis. And this is diagnosed after, and sometimes not even after the first child, it's after they have, like the one case I saw, this lady had 4 children, and there was a lady in Zimbabwe who woke up one day, gave all of her children poison, and they died. And, we want to demonize things that we actually need to understand more about the chemical imbalances that happen in someone's mind and how best can we help. Because this woman was thinking she's saving her children, from whatever she thought was going to attack the children, right? I remember in the one, she told the husband that I am going to kill the children. They were on a walk and he was trying to get into a routine whereby she could relax and calm down even when she was taking the meds. And then he realized that it's no longer a thing that he could handle himself, being a health practitioner, a doctor himself, but not a mental health specialist. He had to get his wife booked in and she was helped. So these are the things that I think we need to bring to light, that it's not all psychosis is a ritual or spiritual in the sense that somebody is doing this to an individual, but we need to really sit down and educate ourselves around, the stuff that happens behind the scenes that we do not know, get into a routine, find methods that help us to cope with this monster, I'd like to call, that's called mental health, that we all need to conquer. Thank you so much, Coach Bobby, for having a chit-chat with us here at Africa to the World and sharing your insights as well as your expertise in the area of mental health as we continue to talk about postpartum depression and everything mental health, and acknowledging that May is the month of mental health. We're so happy to be, bringing such information to our listeners to, educate them about the spectrum. You're not alone on the spectrum. So I hope this information will help you, navigate your journey of mental health. So thank you so much for listening to our podcast. And from me, Yvonne.
And Shami.
We will catch you on the next go around.